Good morning, Bonnie. Thank you for meeting with me today. I'm excited to hear about your lesson. I wanted to just get started with getting a little bit of information about your class. So could you start by just telling me the topic of your lesson?
The topic of my lesson is the fairy tale, The Three Little Pigs. And they're going to be retelling a story about the three little pigs.
Okay, and why did you choose retell for this group?
We have been working on retelling about stories and stories that they love and are kind of familiar with all year.
Great, and that's such a good skill. I know you have TK students. It's such a good skill for them getting into reading comprehension later, being able to retell those skills. So that's a good choice for the lesson today. I know that you've been working, because it's a TK classroom, on really preparing them for kindergarten next year. So I know retell was one of those pieces that you wanted to include. Are there other things that come up in your lesson that you feel like just kind of pre-kindergarten skills that we'll all be seeing when I come in?
We're working on listening skills. We're working on sitting crisscross applesauce. We're working on focusing on the teacher. All of those sort of pre-ready for school skills.
Great. So a lot of social skills, and you're finding your kids are needing those social skills. We've discussed a little bit. I've been able, thank you for letting me come in, just to pop in just from my other roles into your classroom. And I know we've talked about just kind of working on increasing classroom management. So when I was going through the California standards for teaching professions and just in our conversations, it was looking like maybe a good area for us to focus on is just in standard 2, creating and maintaining an effective environment. And what stood out to me were maybe standards 2.4, where we're establishing and maintaining standards for student behavior. And it sounds like in your lesson already you're working on listening skills and social skills. And the other one was just 2.5, planning and implementing classroom procedures and routines to support student learning. Are those two areas that you feel like would be good for me to keep an eye on during my observation?
Absolutely. That's exactly what we want to kind of focus in on and make sure that the students are doing that during the lesson.
And for both of those, what are kind of some areas that are important to you to focus on these two?
I'd like to make sure that the students aren't talking to each other during the lesson.
Okay.
I'd like to make sure that their eyes are kind of staying on the teacher and paying attention to the lesson, and make sure that they are focused and really enjoying the lesson and engaged in the lesson.
Okay. So as you think about your lesson, and thank you, you turned into me a very detailed lesson about the three little pigs. And when I look at just our pre-observation form that we're kind of filling out as we go from the district, one of the things that we want to look at is just how you're going to keep those two standards of kind of classroom management in mind for your lesson. So as we talk about, I see that you have an art activity and the story. Kind of what are your ideas for moving the students around the room? Are they going to be at a table? Kind of what is your setup for the lesson?
We're going to start on the carpet.
Okay.
We're going to be doing a lesson where we listen to the CD,
okay,
and then we are watching the book. I can kind of pay attention then to make sure that my students are focused while we're listening to the story. We're going to then be working on picture cards.
Okay.
And I have an apron that we're going to be looking at the story and retelling it, and then model how to retell with the cards. And then the students are going to work in partners to retell. And after we retell the story, then we're going to move to the table to do a paper bag pig activity.
Okay. And for TK students, what is your expectation for the coloring? I know that's a good fine motor skill to start with.
This will actually be pink paper.
Okay.
And all they really need to do is we're going to be gluing.
Gluing. So working on that gluing skill. Okay, great. So in some of what I heard you talking about today and just through observations I had, I know you have high expectations for your students, which is great. We want to have our TK students really knowing that we're here at school and how we're learning to be at school. So one area I know you've had concern with is just We've had a mix of parents who say, great, we want these high expectations, and some that say, oh, expectations are too high. So as I heard you talking to, I thought maybe I could also just look at Standard 3.1. And Standard 3.1 is talking about just choosing basically content that's developmentally appropriate. And from what I hear you seeing this morning, I already see evidence of that. Something that they're doing their motor skills of gluing and cutting, listening and retelling, having a hands-on project, so that's good. But also keep that in mind during our observation if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
What is it that you would like students to know at the end of this lesson?
I want them to be focused on the story and be able to know the sequence of a story from beginning to end and be able to retell it using the words first, next, then finally.
Okay. And I like how you chose transition words that are words that we're using across our school, especially when we're working with thinking maps and retelling those pieces. So that's a great job of using those transition words that our kinder students are hearing and our first grade students are hearing, so they're starting with you, which is great. One thing when we're talking about classroom management that I realized that I needed to kind of go back to is if you could tell me just a little bit about some of the students in your class and why you're wanting to focus on kind of classroom management. What types of students are you dealing with that is kind of changing up possibly the management of your class?
Do you want names?
Without names, yeah.
Without names, okay. One of our students has severe attachment issues.
Okay.
She's seeing a counselor and she's easily distracted.
Okay.
She elopes, so we're working on finding high interest activities in the classroom to keep her motivated to stay in the classroom.
Okay.
We have a couple that have severe speech issues.
Okay.
And so we work on listening for what they're saying and correcting their speech. We have a couple of twins who have crying issues, both of them, but one is more severe than the other.
Okay.
So we're trying to ignore the crying and give positive for when they are attending to what we're doing in class. We also have a couple of students who are very low academically, and so we're just kind of keeping an eye on them and seeing if after this year, if they will continue to progress. We're hoping they'll progress,
Okay.
but this is sort of a touch base with school, but then next year we are concerned about them, so we want to make sure they stay on track. I have one who likes to hit if he gets overwhelmed,
Okay.
so we're working on Kaikuti and keeping our hands to ourselves. And then we also have a student who is young for the class, and so what I'm working on is can she also attend?
Okay.
So making sure that she's not wandering the room.
Okay, so those two standards when we're looking at classroom management look like good ones to focus on because that will help us to just get a picture of what are your kind of expectations in place for how they move around the room and be able to see if that's working. I think your lesson outline scaffolds well for them being able to listen but also visually see the pictures. I think for some of your lower academic ones that's good, and being able to hear something read correctly for your students with speech is also an important modeling piece. And then having a hands-on piece with retell. It sounds like you're modeling the retell first, and then they're going to do a partner activity. So you have the I do, we do, you do piece already built into your lesson, which is something we want to see in those lesson plans. That's great. Right now, what are some classroom just procedures and routines that are helping your students stay focused, or areas maybe more specifically that you want me to take a look at for just your natural procedures, maybe between how you want them to sit on the rug, how you want them to move to tables? Do you have any specific routines that you already use to help students stay focused?
Well, usually when we're on the carpet, we basically are sitting crisscross applesauce and attending, and we have our very own rectangle to sit in.
Okay.
And so students know that it's their rectangle and where to be, and they're not supposed to be moving around. We have a couple who tend to move their rectangle.
Okay.
And so they have a set spot, but it moves. And also it sort of moves because of the fact that we went from 25 now down to a small group. So they tend to like to be a little closer to
Okay.
the teacher, and so that's why we tend to
Okay.
move our rectangle a little bit. And then the other thing is that when we move to the tables in the large group, we tend to go to our stationary spots on the carpet to go to move to a table. But when there's only 12 in the room, we tend to just walk to the
Okay.
tables, and they choose one or the other.
Okay.
So it's not
Set maybe
as
for everything.
set for
Okay.
everything.
There's a lot of changes. I know you go in the TK classroom from half of them in the morning for about an hour. Is that correct? And then all 24 come for about an hour and a half, and then the AMs leave and PMs are here by themselves. Okay. I know you've talked a little bit already about just the materials that you're going to use. So if I'm looking through our pre-observation form, you've told me what your lesson content standard is about, what you want them to know, being able to just retell at the end, and the materials that you're going to use. You've got retell cards and a book, a CD for them. And so just kind of coming to the end of this, what assessment methods will you use to determine the learning objective was met? So even with our TKers, what are you going to kind of be looking for to make sure that they've got that retell piece?
Oh, I need to move around the room
Okay.
and pay attention to each group as they're retelling, and listen to, can they use the words first, next, then, finally. Also, I'm looking to make sure that they are able to work with a partner and that they are staying on track for the story.
Okay, great, Bonnie. So what I'm hearing you say for assessment, you kind of have the quick check method with observation as you go around listening for that vocabulary that you've already taught them. But I also hear that you have a social component of your lesson too, based on the needs of your students needing to interact correctly together. So I'll be looking for both of those.
And modeling.
And modeling. Great, and that's, as you know, so important for our younger students. Is there anything else you would like me to know about your classroom or lesson before our observation tomorrow?
I think we've covered it.
Well, thank you very much for your time today.